One thing you'll come to learn on Your Big Next is that it's a constant evolution, one that I am most certainly not immune to as I continually identify and discern what my big next is, right? Like so much of my big next for a long time now has been writing the book and then the evolution of the brand and the podcast. And now I'm in this unique season where I can share with you in real time what it's like to apply the principles that I'm going to be teaching you. And the reason I can speak to it is because I'm continuously in these trenches with you. So today I want to talk about something that keeps coming up with my mentors, it keeps coming up with my clients, and it keeps coming up in the frustrations of my visionary time where I'm sitting and I'm trying to really figure this out for myself. And the idea is around your model. Now, you've heard the term business model a bajillion times, but I want you to think of it from a different angle. It's really the model through which you run everything, the model for your business, the model for your life. And so today I want to talk about how maybe the business you've built up to this point is going to require a reimagining of the model in order for it to grow and be fruitful going into the future in alignment with your big next, right? Because if you continually try and push and you're wondering why it feels like square peg, round hole, or things aren't landing, or you're not feeling inspired, or you're not gaining the momentum or the growth that you're seeking, it could be because the old model's broken. And just like there's an evolution and growth in you, the model might require that same evolution and growth. So we're going to talk about maybe your business plan is what's killing your big next. And maybe that's what needs the reimagining right alongside you. Let's jump into it. Could your model of your business right now, as it stands today, your current business plan, how you've been functioning for years up to this juncture, could it be the silent killer of your potential? Could it be the cage that's keeping your big next just out of reach, feeling like you're feeling inspired, you know there's something greater out there for you, but man, I can't seem to achieve it. I can speak to this way more than I wish I could because I've walked through it even as of late. And one of the things that I really want to try and do on this show is make modern leadership something where we are willing to pull back the curtain and share the nitty gritty and the real and the raw of that messy middle of the process, because so often we just hear, via megaphone from the person on the mountaintop how great it is up there, but there's really no perception or viewpoint or vantage point that allows us to see, okay, but what was happening when it was really hard on the way? And one thing that I came to the realization of, along with the, really with scaffolded by the help of mentors and people that I keep close in my circle, was okay, yes, I'm being called into something greater. So that's going to require an up-leveling of me. It's going to require an evolution of me. It's going to require another way of stepping into leadership for me. But is the model in which I'm running my business, the business model, like the actual offers I have, or the way I run my business, or how my team is structured, or what my revenue streams are, what my margin is it conducive for where I'm going? And it's been a very humbling experience, because so often this is the plague of success, is that when we find something that has, quote, worked, right? Like that's good, that we've figured it out, that we've gained our success and our financial stability and all of those things up to this point using this model, it is very uncomfortable to question whether we continue in this way. And I think a lot of people use the word pivot and it feels really overwhelming, but maybe it's just a part of your growth process. What if what you're functioning within now is keeping you small and stuck and safe? So the goal of today is to really challenge the foundational assumptions about the model that you've been in, what has worked up to this point, because we talk all the time about what got you here won't get you there, what got you here will keep you here, to talk about what it looks like to reimagine, right? And reinvent the model of your business and how it can be an evolution, not necessarily this hardcore pivot that feels really stressful to you. And why not doing this can be what is ultimately keeping you in mediocrity and robbing you of, that exponential growth and freedom. And really, knowing you're stepping into your calling, we don't want you to be divided from that. So let's talk through it. Here is there's this myth of certainty that I think many of us cling to once we've found some momentum or success, right? We say, okay, this is predictable, right? Like, let me give you an example in case you're an example person. When I say model, I mean like, here's an example. We have our mastermind. That's a part of our model, right? So part of our model is once a year, we launch our mastermind and we bring in people at a certain rate, a certain number of people, and that's one piece of the model. And how we deliver that mastermind is a part of the model, right? Like the amount of time we spend and what we create to allow for transformation for our clients and all of that. Another piece of that model in the past for us has been years ago, it was like I had tons of one-on-one clients and the bulk of my time was on calls, fulfilling on that deliverable of one-on-one coaching. Okay. For you, it might be digital products. It might be a physical product. It might be a service. That's all a part of the model. That's what I'm talking about when I say it. It's literally your business model. It's how you do business. And it's how you fulfill on the offers that you have or the services you have or the products that you have. And it's how it ultimately affects how your life is being lived. When I was in that season of really solely having one-on-one clients, like my schedule was booked solid. We had great margin. We were making a ton of money and I was miserable because I had from my perspective, that model was keeping me very stuck. I couldn't scale. I could just raise my prices. I was the product. So that was exhausting in seasons of having babies and being postpartum and being pregnant and whatever else. I was still working, 10, 12-hour days to fulfill on the offer of that one-on-one service. So that model was really limiting for me. So there was a time many years ago where I had to reimagine the model. I had to ask myself, man, yes, I've found, quote, success doing it this way, but is this how I want to proceed? Like, is this allowing for my big next? Is this allowing for the growth that I want to see? So instead of locking yourself into a fixed way of doing things, I see this a lot with people in the real estate industry or the medical industry or the health industry in general of like, no, this is just how we do it. Like, I'm a chiropractor, you book my time, I deliver the service. That's how I make my money. My challenge to you is that in pursuit of the big next, it's an opportunity for you start to reimagine things. It's an opportunity for you to break the mold on your industry and start to explore the corners of possibility and not tell yourself you're stuck, right? So that's the first myth, is that you've found something predictable and that you have to stay in something predictable because this is how it works. Instead of locking yourself into fixed goals and fixed metrics and guarantees and stagnation in a fast-moving world, why not instead break that mold and explore what you can do through different model opportunities? Okay. The second piece of, like an overall flaw of a traditional way of thinking in terms of business is the prison of incremental thinking. We have a tendency, especially when we found success, is that we create conventional plans that focus on linear growth, like 5%, 10% increases, annual revenue targets, quarterly plans. And this approach totally binds you to that incremental slow growth, and it blinds you to exponential opportunities, right? And sometimes you have to just rethink. You have to rethink what's really possible. It's right in line with everything we teach around your big next, is that this possibility and this exponential is actually going to come more easily and more fluidly than this slow incremental growth that requires consistent grinding. And it also oftentimes totally robs you of the life that you feel called to live, right? Most models or business plans, especially maybe the old school or traditional ones, or the ones that you've built because it was what worked at the time, they don't prioritize your personal value system, your family, your quality of life over what the business needs to function within that model. If you are building a thriving business, making a ton of money, and it's killing your relationships, your health, and your joy, you're functioning within the wrong model. And I know I need to think of another word than model, because I'm going to say it about 8,000 times in this episode, but it's a concept I want you to get into your head, rattling around as loudly as it did for me, to inspire you enough to rethink possibility and to step into change. So how does one reimagine a model? Well, the first thing is you need to have a paradigm shift. You have to stop thinking in small timelines and think instead. We talk all the time with our visionary CEOs in our mastermind. You don't think in timelines, you think in trajectories. So fixed timelines, quarterly, annually, right? By the month, this week. They create this unnecessary pressure to perform within these arbitrary periods that feel so critical and important, but they are literally just a timeline on a calendar. So the shift instead is planning based on momentum and trajectory, asking, where do I want to head? Not just where do I want to arrive? When you're thinking small, you're saying, okay, where do I want to be 1 month from now? Instead of where am I going long? What is my big next leading me into over the next 3 to 5 years? Some actionable things you can apply to this to start to break out of the current model of thinking that you're operating in. It's not just a business model. This is just a model of how you think. It's a pattern of how you think. Start plotting those trajectories based on, you can kind of like do an assessment. Look at your past efforts and say, are these efforts, when combined, leading me on a trajectory that's upward? Is it lateral? Am I just going to kind of be in the same place a year from now, having maintained something? Is it taking me into 10x, 100x growth? Is it taking me into this slow, 5, 10% growth? So when you start to plot your efforts, you can see, am I on a trajectory or am I just on a timeline? Am I on a path to my big next, or am I just maintaining what is? And then you can start to identify what exponential growth could even look like for you if there were no constraints, right? This is part of your visionary CEO time, taking time, money, current resources off the table, because to think exponentially, you cannot make decisions solely as the person you are today with the resources you have today. You have to up-level yourself in that moment of thinking and discerning as the visionary that's required of you to go where you're called to go, which means then you have to start making decisions as that visionary and doing things that visionary would do, which means you probably don't have the perfect team in place to experience that 20x growth. You probably don't have the funds or the capital to fuel what's required to experience that growth. That's okay, because that's all a part of the growth process. So part of the process of breaking down the current model that you are trapped within that's keeping you stuck is starting to think outside of the lines of what you have access to in this very moment. Because if you only make decisions as the thinker you are today with the resources you have available today, you will only be able to reach things that are within arm's reach as that person with those resources. Versus when you see people with great momentum and taking these giant leaps and stepping into their big next, they have made choices, they have thought through things, they have reimagined things, not based on limitation, but based on possibility. And then you can start to reverse engineer, okay, what actions are going to push me towards that trajectory? What are the high leverage moves I can make versus the low leverage ones that I live in most of my days? Instead of spending every day in meetings and on calls, what could I be doing to propel me to a greater trajectory? And then you start to weigh those arbitrary deadlines and BS that you've been putting so much weight on, and you start to find that fire and that fuel and that inspiration again that's going to come from the trajectory that you want to pursue. So the second step in this process is becoming agile, right? Like embracing fluidity, which is really hard for certain personality types. I get that. We use something called the dynamic plan framework. So it's super simple. We want to break out of rigid traditional models and plans. The shift instead is building a dynamic plan that it evolves in real time. You've heard me say, if you've been around for a while, you tweak your way to victory. That's exactly what this is. Okay. So instead of saying, okay, here's the model, here's the plan, here's exactly what's required, here's how many calls I'm going to do to get there, here's the timeline that I'm going to do it in, you're instead becoming dynamic, you're becoming fluid, you're becoming agile, becoming malleable to whatever opportunities come your way, whatever challenges come your way, and you evolve and you tweak your way to victory by creating and opening feedback loops that give you the answers you need to evolve and get better. The first piece, in my humble opinion, is getting inspired again, is really tapping in to your big next. Like, what do you feel like God is calling you to in this season? When you think about the categories of impact and wealth, like generational wealth, like the wealth legacy you want to leave, the freedom you want to have, the alignment you want to have, the quality of life you want to have. When you think about those categories, I want you to think about things that would live underneath them in your life, almost like a big next vision board. We're kind of like just allowing dreaming for a minute. And then for each of those categories, ask, Again, thinking outside the limits of what you're experiencing today. What's the wildest freaking possibility I've been just afraid, straight up fearful to dream about? Maybe it's because you didn't think it was possible. Maybe because you're like, that would cost me so much money. Maybe because you're like, I can't afford to give up more time with my kids, because you're making assumptions that going 10x requires 10x more of your time, right? So start dreaming and thinking, what are those possibilities? They speak to me, but I've been afraid to even allow my mind to go to them, despite how they're patterns and nudges that keep coming up in my life. And then what you can start to do, if you want to make it tangible, is you build in systems in your life that do adapt with the trajectory you're on. You set goals that are directional, not final. I used to set goals that were so final, like I'm going to sell 50 units of this by month's end, right? And it was just like that. And if I didn't hit it, I had failed. Versus I am going to expand my reach in this market, in these markets, and I'm going to start to explore what the benefits are of starting to put myself on the speaking circuit and the podcast circuit and building relationships. Like, it's more expansive and directional, not just this like hit it or quit, right? And then I start to use usually a 90-day runway to help me start to turn the cruise ship. Like every quarter, I'm asking myself, is this plan still aligned with what I'm called to live? Really, I'm bringing it into the conversation weekly. Our team has been assessing and assessing and assessing. And it's just been really helpful. Like, hey guys, what do you have in your docket this week? What are you working towards this week? What still feels aligned? What feels off track? What do we need to change? What needs to come off your plate? Do we need to make any hires? Do we need to eliminate anything? Can we automate or systemize anything? We're just like constantly pulse checking. Is this taking us closer to the life we want to live by creating the model that supports that? Or is it taking us farther from it? And it's pretty black and white in terms of the answer. And then we can make decisions accordingly. And then we also start to prioritize, our freedom plan, right? Entrepreneurs constantly build businesses that don't align with the life they want to live, but they're completely blind to it. It's like they try to compartmentalize themselves. Like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur over here. I'll hustle and do my thing so that I can have freedom over here. And everything's so intertwined, it's not possible. So the shift becomes, start with your life plan. I talk about this all the time. And then identify, like, what are your non-negotiables for yourself, but also for your family? How do you want to live? What are the values you want to live by? What would that look like in real time to be living by those values? And then you start to build the business model that supports that. When I was in a time for money model where it's like, okay, pay me and then you get my time, and I was booked solid every day with calls, not to mention the fact that I'm introverted and it totally drained me. So by the time I was done my day, I had nothing left in the tank for my family. I was unhappy. We were making great money, but I was miserable and I had no freedom. So it was pretty evident, okay, it's time to break this model. It's time to reimagine how I can do this. So you can do this. This is something, it's coming. The book is coming soon, which means you are going to get access to the playbooks and how I do this. We do this very intimately with our Visionary CEO Mastermind. If that's something, if you are ready to like have us put our arm around you and like sprint with you this next year so that you can fully step into your big next and experience the results with it, go to luminaryleadershipco.com/incubator and apply, because we are going to be filling this. It is invite only and nomination only, but sometimes from those applications, we will often send invitation if we feel like it's aligned. But start to create that ideal week. What would you want your life to look like? Business, family, freedom, all of that. What would it look like if you weren't constrained to the current way you do business? Again, going back to that life plan, what are your non-negotiables? How much time are you spending with family? What parts of your day are preserved for what things, right? Instead of just reacting to your schedule and waking up in the morning and finding out what's on your calendar, how are you creating the space? This is why we use the Visionary CEO process, right? And the Visionary CEO schedule to help you create both a life and a business model that fuels you, that energizes you, that supports those non-negotiables. And you start to restructure in time, Now, this is a lot easier to do when you have someone coaching you through the process, but it's restructuring your business in time around the pillars that really matter. And then you're delegating or eliminating or systemizing tasks that conflict with your ideal life. I can't even tell you how much we are using AI to support elements of our business. Not the part, we're not doing it to sacrifice the community or the human elements, but like the systemized elements behind the scenes that keep us more organized saves us so much time and money. And then we also look for opportunities, like what are some scalable revenue streams that require less of our time, right? Different things like that. I like to also, I care about revenue because revenue is really, cash flow is evidence of the health of your business. So I don't abandon revenue, but if revenue doesn't also tie to impact, transformation for people, right? Like, so here's the example. I have a client, or I've had a client that was obsessed with using us to help them get their messaging and their marketing right to sell one of their products. And then I asked, can I see the product? I want to see the offer. I want to study the offer because that dictates the messaging. No, it doesn't really matter. It's fine. We just want to sell it. And what was happening was they were constantly having to go out and find new people because they were never creating people who were advocates for these products and these offers because the offer sucked. They put so much time in trying to manipulate people into buying and not enough time in ensuring the efficacy of their product that they weren't creating actual transformation. So it was all about profit and not about transformation or impact. And we stopped working with them because they wouldn't make the shift. Because as much as revenue matters, cash flow matters, profit and margin matter. Absolutely. You got to be looking at your balance sheet, your P&L, and knowing where you're at financially, whether you like numbers or not. But at the same time, are you tying the value to the work you're doing, to the offers you're creating, and really defining what impact actually means for you? What's the cost of you not doing this work? And if the answer is nothing because the work doesn't really matter, I'm just trying to sell it, we've got to reimagine because there's no integrity in that. And then you align your KPIs, your business KPIs, with those outcomes of both revenue and impact. And you're coming back to that monthly in your team meeting saying, hey, have we gotten any testimonials? How are people doing in this program? What can we improve? What are some case studies to highlight how people are doing? Oh, people are getting stuck here. How can we enhance the program? How can we fix it? Okay. So once you've done those things, break the theory that you have to always stick to one plan because you made it. You may have found incredible success up to this juncture. But if you're lacking in fulfillment or quality of life or clarity of where you're being called to go, when you are so dead set on one way of doing things because it's how you've always done it, you're an old dog who doesn't want to learn new tricks, and you are suffocating innovation. And innovation is where you're going to thrive. Innovation is where you're going to stay relevant. So diversifying and creating your big next experiment portfolio and taking these bold leaps and identifying what are the experiments, what are the risks that I'm going to take this year, right? I'm going to start to scale through AI. I've never done it. I'm going to learn it. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to try to launch this new offer that's really speaking to me. It's kind of out of left field, but I know it'll really serve people. We're going to test this. I'm going to shift into a different market that I've never served. I'm going to launch that podcast. I'm going to write that book. What are the initiatives and the diversifying of your big, bold, big next experiment portfolio that are the risks you're going to take, the innovations you're going to make, and dedicate 20% of resources to testing these ideas alongside your core business. Commit to faster iteration. Commit to testing and tweaking your way to victory. Kill what doesn't work quickly and double down on what does. Don't try and perfect. This is your opportunity to open feedback loops, get information, and create from a place of inspiration. Okay. So like when you think of companies like Netflix, they abandoned DVD rental. They killed it in the DVD rental space, but it was time to innovate, and they embraced streaming, and they were ahead of their time before it was mainstream, and then they killed it, right? Airbnb, instead of expanding traditionally, they reimagined how people experience hospitality. How are you going to do this? Because your traditional plan might be what's choking out your big next. You might be over here studying leadership, growing, pushing, but you're doing it within a model that is no longer supporting where you're going. The same way we've had conversation of what do you have to untether from? What do you have to unhitch from that's holding you back from what's next? That's true for the business too, even if the business has killed it up to this point. The future belongs to those who think dynamically, they prioritize that alignment with what they're called to do with their big next, and dare to reimagine what's actually possible for them. So it's time to rewrite and reimagine this business plan, this model, this structure. I've been doing this and it's been so liberating, so exciting, so scary, because I'm like, man, am I really going to shut down things that work? But I made a commitment. Last year, when I survived that near-death experience, I am not going to spend another minute doing anything that's not aligned with what God's calling me to do. And if He's not calling me to do it anymore in this model, we've got to change the model, right? It's not just about planning differently. It's about living differently, leading differently. And your big next is waiting. So are you ready to reimagine the vision for what's possible? Make space for an evolution of both you and the model. If this speaks to you, please, will you leave us a review? Like, we need an infusion. Now that we're your big next, it's a totally new show on the horizon. This was part of our reimagining, and we want it to support and pour into you. So if this speaks to you, please go leave us a review. We would be so grateful, and share it with someone who could really use this. Share this with someone that you know is being called to greatness, but they need that nudge. What got them here won't get them there. What got them here will keep them here, right? It's time for an evolution. Thanks for tuning in.